Welcome to the Hail to the District podcast. Rajan and Patrick kicking off what we hope to be one of as many game-by-game recap podcasts for the Washington football team. This 2020 NFL season is possible by celebrating an incredibly gratifying, if not surprising, win over the Philadelphia Eagles by a final score of 27-17. Pat, let's just get right into it. It's just one win. It's only one game and one win out of one game this season, but at the risk of over exuberance, like this one just hits different. The significance of the win shouldn't be understated. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But given the shit that this team's just gone through over so many years, and given the MO of this team for God knows how long, it's just like I said. This hits different. This felt different. It felt incredibly gratifying, as I mentioned. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no, you're kind of spot on. I will say, harkening back to our season preview podcast, which was like an hour and a half. So anyone that listened to the whole thing, thank you.
Respect.
But I did say we were going to beat the Eagles. I don't know why, but I was like all in on it. I'm really glad I was because the word I wrote it down. The word after the game to me was what a cathartic win.
Good word.
You know, a year ago we were up 17-0 in Philly. Opening day, and then we got smoked. And the difference in the team, yes, we came back and won. There's obviously that like kind of parallel significance of the games. But like the last 6 years, that team would have folded like a lawn chair. It's just one of the things you said in our last podcast of season preview was the idea of like how much better coached are we going to be? I think that like shone bright today. I think back to we had 8 sacks, and 3 forced turnovers. But my favorite sack was the Bostic sack on 4th down.
Oh,
and it wasn't
beautiful.
it wasn't the sexiest sack. It was like Chase Young split Peters on a spin cycle for a strip sack, which was sweet. But he's like, first off, homeboy Minuski would never have blitzed there. Second off, the reason I like thought of coaching right away was they were playing with an offensive line that probably didn't take a single snap together in the entire like truncated training camp thing we went through. So sending the blitz confused the hell out of them, and no one – I mean, it was like the seas parted. And thank God – I don't really think Bostic is that good. I think he's a good backup, but not a starter. Thank God he didn't whiff on the sack like he did in the first quarter.
Yep, remember that one.
So – the win was awesome. Haskins was a little bit like Alex Smith today, no turnovers. Coincidentally, I just read Les Carpenter's piece in the Post right before this. He threw for 178 yards. The last 3 wins, and Alex Smith threw 178 yards and a touchdown with no picks. So how weird.
Eerie, just eerie.
Eerie. There's things we need to clean up. I like our offense a lot. There's a lot of movement involved. I loved how we had 2 play calls inside the 5 right away, so we didn't even huddle. Like small little coaching things like that, big to me. We need better receivers. No one can get any separation except for McLaurin, but he also had Slay on him today, so like I didn't expect him to have a big game. And then the last 2 things I'll leave you with is the Haskins dapping people up on the sideline.
Huge. We'll talk a lot about Haskins, but yes.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to scream it from the mountaintops until it happens. This is kind of a negative turn here for me. Get Troy Apke off of my team.
Yeah, from your mouth to Carl Smith's ears.
God, he's awful. I can't even – we saw so much curl today. I'm curious if he got benched because, like, God, he's bad. But those are my thoughts from today. I mean, what a cathartic win. I am pumped. I started screaming Super Bowl sarcastically in my house today. I obviously know we're not going to be in the Super Bowl, but I said it was going to be pandemonium if we beat Philly at home to start Ron Rivera. And not only do we beat them, we beat them by double digits. So cathartic is how I feel.
I can't remember if it's Tony Kornheiser or Steve Zabin who used to say, fire up the bandwagon. It's
Kornheiser.
Is it Kornheiser? That's right. So yeah. It's fire it up, gas it up, baby. Take it out of the garage, take the cover off of it. It is in full gear. Obviously, tongue in cheek and all of that. Going back to the point about with the difference, the value of a replacement in terms of the coach, right? Like the one thing that just kept shining through in a few text message exchanges I had with people after the game, it's how many times was it Washington, to your point, who would get out to this big lead and just fall apart after that, right? Just completely hitting on cruise control. Like we used to say that was one of Gruden's biggest bugaboos, right? That like the team started smelling itself way too fast. The moment things went good, we loved ourselves and we immediately we rested on our own laurels. There were a few games in particular. One game, I don't know why this stuck out to me, in addition to the Eagles game last year, it was Gruden's lone playoff game against the Packers. Do you remember we went up like 14-0 in that game, and we end up losing, right? Among many others that I'm sure I'm just missing off the top of my head. But it was so eerie in a way to kind of be on the opposite side of that, where we're just getting our ass kicked. And to that end, how many times under the Gruden regime, if not other regimes, frankly speaking, was it that if we're down 17-0 in the middle of the second quarter, like you've got dudes on the sidelines making dinner reservations and like they're checked out. They're like that, this game is a laugher. Like full disclosure, I was joking around with my friends in the Slack thread and I'm like, this already feels like one of those games where I put this game on mute and I just watch Red Zone full time, on the second TV. And I'm like, and I'll just keep an eye on, make sure nothing's happening. And to be completely honest on that point, I did put it on mute. I did turn on Red Zone full time because I'm like, all right, today's gonna be a laugher. Just another day in the life of the Washington football team. And then when Moreau had the first pick, and then we turned it into 7, if I'm not mistaken, if that was the sequence, I was like, all right, let's turn this back on. Let's just see, if this is fake news, or let's see that like this is legit. But I think to put it into context, Fox flashed the stat that 2 things. This was the first time that the Washington football franchise overcame a 17-0 or 17-point deficit since the U like that game against Tampa Bay. Number 1.
Oh, I was at that game.
And the first time they overcame a 17-0 deficit to beat Philadelphia in 65 years. 65, yeah, my math is correct. Since 1955. So again, those are big numbers. Those are big lofty statements or whatever. And it's just one game. It's just one game, to use the old cliche. But just think about that context. It's so different, right? We outscored Philadelphia 20-0 in the second half. We outscored them 27 straight. Right? Fox kept flashing that stat of like Wentz's first 4 drives, and then after that, Bupkis, right? And we'll talk about the defensive line a little more in a little bit, but it's funny. I love watching Philadelphia fans. One of my favorite things in the world, they don't even have to be playing the DC sports teams, right? But like just watching them after any major loss. Like Philadelphia fans throw their feces at each other as well as any group of primates in the world in general. Like they are hucking their shit at each other, sheer anarchy, and I love it. It is the most heartwarming thing in the world. You've got the New Jersey Shore guys, you've got all the orange Real Housewives husbands on one side, you got the Philly cheesesteak Guidos on the. It's just magical. I'm watching them like in this big Royal Rumble against each other, and I love how they were all like trashing Carson Wentz after today. And Wentz wasn't great. Wentz was electric in the first.
He had no chance.
Wentz was getting his ass handed to him by, as you said, like dudes just off the street, right? Like dudes working at FedEx last week. And like the Eagles were signing them and starting them. And, no sympathy for them because signing offensive linemen and playing them, that's what the Washington team did all of the second half of last year. So like, 0.0% sympathy from me. But like the fact that so many of them pinned this on Wentz and they're like, Nick Foles is my quarterback and let's start warming up Jalen Hurts after one game. I loved it.
Just wasn't even active today.
Yeah, I know. But like just the sheer idiocy of all of this, it was magical. And to finalize that point, Carson Wentz, according to NFL Next Gen stats, if I was reading this correctly, his completion percentage was actually 10% better than his expected completion percentage. So given the situation that he was in, he actually outperformed that. Even with a QBR of 14.1 on the day, he actually outperformed his expected completion percentage. That's how bad the situation was around him. But wrapping it all up, and you alluded to this earlier, they were in a bad situation, and we actually had the coaches with enough of an IQ to take advantage of that situation, as opposed to being like, well, we didn't do this, and we didn't need to coach him up better next week or whatever, garbage we used to hear. Like they took advantage of the Eagles being depleted in certain cases. And the fact that they eventually kind of adjusted, you mentioned Cam Curl, that they knew the Eagles receivers were garbage. At some point they realized, look, Deshaun Jackson with one arm and Greg Ward, and I don't even know who else was out there on the field. Maybe Matt Collins. I didn't even see him, right? Like, they can't beat us. Even as bad as our secondary was, and we'll get to them too, like, as bad as they were, they're not going to beat us with those guys. So as long as we can start doing something to kind of clamp down on Ertz and Goddard, who ate our lunch in the first half, we should be able to do that. And I think we did. So let's kind of go from there.
Yeah, no, the tight ends have tight ends have been a bane of our existence for as long as I can remember being.
It just felt like deja vu all over again.
I don't care who the coach is. I think Ertz and Goddard had touchdowns today, I think.
Yes. They both did. I think it was the first and second touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. Or they're only 2 touchdowns, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I'm glad you're about the Philly fans thing. Growing up, Dallas was always the team I hated the most. And actually, that's still true.
I was going to say, that's 100% the truth for me.
And probably the Giants were a close second because my godfather actually is he's from New York. He's a diehard Giants fan. And he and my dad, they would go to RFK for the Skins Giants game, and they would go over to Meadowlands for the Giants game there. So and we had family friendly rivalry kind of deal. And I ended up hating the Giants because of it.
Yep.
Having gone to college in Pennsylvania near Philly, and where all of my friends are basically Eagles fans from college, man, I can't stand them. And I remember so vividly sitting there when Vic basically put his whole career Hall of Fame into one game, and sitting there on the couch with my Jason Campbell jersey on, which was outdated because we had just signed McNabb long-term that same day, and just getting roasted. And so today, I was quiet pretty most of the time when they were texting, and then I just went off when we won, because all I heard was they can't lose to the football team. I was like, well, you just lost to a team with no mascot, and not only that, you blew a 17-point lead with a quarterback making $138 million. So, look, this team, I think you're spot on about the coaching. I don't know if Curl came in and played more of a hybrid. I mean, I talked about Hudson playing kind of that hybrid role, which, by the way, he's going to block a punt. He was close twice. But, he blew up a screenplay, Curl did. And all of a sudden, he just kind of started showing up. And I think the best part about him is being a 7th-round guy, you don't want to hear his name. If he's on the field, just don't screw up. And he started popping. And I think the whole defense kind of did too. I need to get used to Landon Collins being number 26. That was confusing.
It was a little hard to kind of parse through. I kept seeing 23, and I'm like, that's D'Angelo Hall. And I'm like, no, that's not D'Angelo Hall. I was confused by the numbers.
But I'm looking at this, and I know you want to do kind of a 3 down type deal, which I do in the Nats podcast.
I was going to say, homage to your Nats podcast for anyone who's not listening. Make sure you listen to it.
And I'm going to follow your lead here based on who you put up, because I generally completely agree.
Yeah, I would be surprised if there was anybody else. Maybe perhaps on the upside, but on the downside, actually. So I kind of, using that as your segue, I grouped it together. I wanted to switch one of the obvious ones to a later conversational point, being the quarterback. But I think if we go 3rd star, 2nd star, 1st star hockey style, I guess the 3rd place, the bronze trophy, if you will, the running backs. And a few people are giving me shit about this. Look, I'm Peyton Barber. I'm sorry. All right. I'm sorry.
He still only ran for 1.7 yards per carry.
I know. Everyone was still, a couple of my friends were still joking. They're like, well, in your defense, he did get you 2 yards, which is, you said that's his MO. But Gibson and Barber, they're not Adrian Peterson and somebody else in their prime, right? They're not, but they ran with zip. And more importantly, they fit the context of the offense. If I'm really being nitpicky, I thought there were opportunities for them to run the football a little more today. And I think we might have gone away from them a bit too often. But putting all of that aside, they provided explosion. They provided guts. They provided the slash, just to take what's there Gibson and move. And I really liked what Gibson brought to the table today.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
And I think both of them were just nice pieces. And I've said this in so many different ways that, look, it's wonderful. It was today, this morning, Dalvin Cook got paid and Alvin Kamara got paid. And there's somebody else who got an extension I'm missing off the top of my head. But all of that put aside, right? In the NFL, the running back is a commoditized position. it's just to the point where you can almost throw dudes at it and you're fine. And if you don't, like, the most easiest piece to replace in the NFL right now might be your second and third running back. Like it just, they're a dime a dozen, which is why I was screaming so much about signing a bunch of running backs until the Darius Guy situation kind of played out and Adrian Peterson situation did, right? So we have a couple of pieces there. They're inexpensive from the perspective of a third round pick and whatever we're paying Peyton Barber, but they still provided value. The ROI, if you will, tremendous. And I love what they brought to the table. It just could be the euphoria of the win, but I think they were, the role that they played on this offense, they did very well.
Yeah, I think you have him right as the third star of the game. I mean, I just alluded to this while you were talking, but I really like Gibson. I know he had so much hype coming into this game, but I expect his role to increase a little, but like kind of, I think he kind of, that's going to be his role. He touched the ball probably 10, 11 times total. I think that's kind of where he's going to be. He's also huge. I didn't realize how like strong, how big he is. He's almost the same size as freaking Derrick Henry, which is mind-boggling to me. I'm not wild about McKissick. I wanted to be, but like I'm excited for Bryce Love to catch up.
I don't think McKissick hit today. Like I don't think anything that was like designed for him worked, and I think that just didn't materialize. So like it didn't shine well for him.
Yeah, and I think Barber. Look, you said he was just a guy, and he would average 2 yards a carry. Well, he averaged 1.7 yards per carry on 17 carries. So you were kind of spot on. But 2 touchdowns. He got the 4th and 2 on a little extra effort. I think it was Barber who got it.
That's the thing.
And like I said this on our previous podcast in the season preview. Look, everyone wanted Adrian Peterson to be in that guy. I would much rather have Adrian Peterson touching the ball 17 times than Peyton Barber. But based on how our offense is going to fluctuate, I don't expect Barber to touch the ball 17 times a game. We just happen to be, luckily, in a lot of positions where we were 3rd and short, 4th and short, goal line, and then we just ran out the clock, which he got like 6 carries in the last 3 minutes of the game. My point is like, it kind of the perfect role. And to your point, we're not paying him freaking anything, basically. I mean, we're a couple million probably as a running back. But the opening snap, I mean, we went 3 and out on our opening drive, I think.
Yeah.
But the opening play, McKissick was in the backfield with Haskins, and he put Gibson in motion, and all of a sudden they're on the field together at the same time. I was pumped. Like, I was so used to just coming out of the gates. To your point about Gruden and like feeling yourself a little too early, Gruden is of the McVay, like Shanahan. They script plays so well, and the difference between someone like Shanahan and Gruden, in my opinion, is Shanahan can continue to coach in the middle of the game, where Gruden just went blank.
That's a great point. Gruden, you could see if the first 15 plays were scripted, you could very clearly cut off where did 15 end and where did 16, 7, and like this is 16,
and
17,
we just went
18. Yep, you could very clearly see. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I mean, I got away from the running backs, but they did their job. I'm very excited by all the movement, which brings you to your second star.
Which it does. Let's put a bow on Peyton Barber. And I think one thing you also called out in your season preview podcast, the difference between whatever we're paying Peterson and let's just say it's roughly comparable to what we're paying Barber. Barber plays teams, right? Barber was on special teams today. If Barber has 5 games where he only gets yeah, that's right. And that would help pin them back even after that Tressway punt that didn't end up like on the 6-yard line or whatever it was, right? Barber is not going to complain if he has 4 games where he only has 6 carries. Peterson will become an issue, right? If that is the case. And so all of that is spot on.
Barber's he's not a gunner, but I mean, would you rather pay someone this like to be in the field that much more? I mean, he just offers so much. I mean, all Rivera's talked about is versatility.
Yes.
And the reason he's a good coach is apparently he doesn't just talk the talk, but he walks the walk.
And going back,
the coordinators.
And I was going to say, going back to the point about the coaching, it's funny because I was watching, I think it was flipping around the Redskins, the Washington football team's Instagram account today, or scrolling on my feed as usual. And I saw the clip of Rivera's game balls after the game. And the second one went to the coordinators. He gave it both to Scott Turner and Jack Del Rio. And that kind of inspired me to put them as my second star of the game, the collective duo of Turner and Jack Del Rio. And the reason why, as much as the fact that, we won today and so forth and so on, right? It was nice to see competence, or I would put it past, it was nice to see intellect used in the game plans. It was nice to see intellect used in the game plans and precision and methodology used in the game plan, as opposed to let's just throw shit against the wall and see how it works. And more importantly, and this just blew my mind entirely, adjustments, in-game adjustments. Oh, you're doing this? Maybe I should counter with this, as opposed to brainlessly jamming a square peg down a round hole, as every fucking coordinator in this city has done for God knows how many years, headlined by Greg Minuski and Joe Barry, right? I mean, we saw more creativeness and effectiveness from Del Rio in one game than we saw in 5 years of Barry and Minuski. I saw, you alluded to with the Bostic point, there was countless plays where, like, that took intellectual, like, that took thought, that took creativity, that took some modicum of outside the box thinking, as opposed to like playing in your sandbox all week and hoping that that's going to work, i.e. the defensive schemes of Joe Barry and Greg Minuski, right? Those guys were fucking incompetent. And it was so great to see, one, a coach who motivated the defense, but two, actually did something original. And going back to this, credit to somebody on Twitter, I can't remember who it was. I think it was one of the Pro Football Focus guys, but if it isn't, I apologize. So he was saying Ertz and Goddard were killing us in the first half of whatever. And somebody mentioned that the Redskins started putting more safeties on the field. Like, all right, Apke, we'll get to him, and Landon Collins were there. But, like, they started using sort of like the linebackers because Bostic was getting killed. Pierre Lewis was getting killed. Like, they started, I think, putting Cam Curl on one of the safeties, and that actually started to clamp them down. Like, that was, like,
they countered that move by throwing the ball deep, which just left Wentz in the pocket for so long that see you later.
And even then, so they changed from going intermediate, so they started to kind of creep the defense up a little bit, knowing that stuff is going to, like, getting feel that stuff is going to be underneath, and then they started going bombs over. Like, there was the one, I mean, if we're going to talk about Troy Apke in a second, like, they almost beat Troy Apke on with the second pass to Jalen Reagor. They hit the first pass over Ronald Darby to Jalen Reagor, right? Like, they started taking shot plays. I think there was one to Jackson one shot play that they tried, but they started going over the top. But eventually, the defensive line and the adjustments, whatever they did there, i.e. attacking the hobos that they had just signed off the street, like, that started to collapse onto Wentz, and eventually he just had no time in the pocket, as you just said, right? And you said it, like, I made a note of this specific play, like the blitz on 4th and 4 by Bostic,
awesome.
Right after the backup, another backup came into the game. I can't remember. I think it was a Driscoll guy or somebody else. He just left the game. Some other dude came in. It was within 1 or 2 plays.
They were down 4 linemen.
Yeah. And literally it's within 2 or 3 plays, and that wasn't even 3, I don't think. And Bostic came and just shot that gap and just blew the hell up on Wentz, and it was magnificent, right? And
yeah,
I mean, it was just great. And it was wonderful to, I mean, we'll get there in a second about the defensive line, but it was just wonderful to see the way they ate and the way they were, like, there were stunts and there was just shit that they were doing that actually worked. And it was great. And then going over to Scott Turner, I thought did a great job in terms of the game plan. And it was from 2 perspectives. One, the movement. We'll get there in a second, or like the creative plays themselves. But it was very clear that if you paid close attention, he built a game plan to get Dwayne Haskins comfortable. And once Haskins was comfortable, which he never really was, and we'll also talk about that, but once Haskins was comfortable, then to take more of the shot plays, then to take more of the, the attack plays. But there were a lot of plays that were kind of sprinkled in. We're like, all right, if he gets off rhythm, let's do this. There was like there's a few screens to like Sims, and there's a few other like, swing plays out there where like you could just tell that this is one of those plays that was deliberately put in. We're like, all right, let's get Haskins' feet back underneath him, or it was called to say, all right, Haskins is getting a little out of rhythm. Let's kind of put this back in so we can start building his rhythm back, or rebuilding it, so that we can start operating the offense and opening it up even more than it currently was. And then the movement, like you talked about with having McKissick and not Barber, but Gibson in the backfield, and having those guys. And then like I think maybe my favorite play of the game from a schematic viewpoint was the first touchdown pass to Logan Thomas, where like dude just wide open, like wide open. Like, and the Eagles players all kind of like running around pointing at each other, like who's got this dude? And you could see there was very obvious confusion. Meanwhile, like Logan just basically ran to the W of the Washington football team in the end zone and was just wide open. Like, Haskins could have probably completed that with his eyes closed. And I think there was a lot of deliberately thoughtful and meticulous game planning done by Turner, which is just, again, such a, it's not, as you said, it's past Gruden just doing the first 15 plays and then let's just see how it goes after that. Like there was it was just well thought out, and I loved watching all of that.
Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised by Logan Thomas. I'm not wild about him. There's probably 30 other starting tight ends that are better than he is. But
I'm not anointing him Tony Gonzalez just yet. I mean, let's just be
honest. I mean, I guess anyone could have caught that touchdown because he was so open. But he flashed a few times. He was a willing blocker. He's better than Sprinkle, right? Okay, and that just goes to show how bad we were last year. It's something I think that people need to understand when assessing Dwayne is what he actually was playing with last year. But to your Turner's point, I mentioned the first play of the game when he motioned Gibson in motion, or put Gibson in motion, and all of a sudden McKissick and Gibson were together in the backfield. I was like, oh, this could be kind of cool. And, you saw a couple options. You saw tight ends moving freaking everywhere. My favorite play of the game from just a pure offensive play was it was a quick fake toss to a screen to Sims. Yeah. That he busted for probably 20 yards. That dude's quick.
Yes.
And it's little things like that. Like, we don't have – I talked about this a little bit earlier. We don't have – other than McLaurin, none of our receivers can really get or create separation. We're kind of really handicapped in throwing the ball down the field. But you do have guys like Sims who you get him in space and he can get the ball, he can move. So I was pumped to see that. And to your point, you mentioned Haskins, like the design of the offense was to try to get him into some sort of rhythm. Well, his rhythm was bad for a little while. Yeah. I jokingly sent a text to my buddy Joe, who just he's not in on Haskins. He thinks he's terrible. I jokingly sent him a text, said, "Hey, get the Trevor Lawrence scouting report on my desk by end of day." But Grant Paulson tweeted out something that I'm not a huge Grant fan, but I thought this was a great tweet. Haskins started 3 for 12, like bad. He finished 14 of his final 19. Didn't turn the ball over. Had a touchdown. Made timely plays. He needs to learn how to slide. Although I'm still not sure how there was no penalty thrown late in the game when he slid, got popped,
and on the shoulder.
And there was no flag.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, I was like, he gave himself up, but neither here nor there. But I liked the offense. I think we're gonna struggle at times. To my point, I just don't Inman's doesn't inspire confidence. Candy Golden, I don't even think was on the field. I'm not even sure if he was active.
He was active, but he wasn't. He was.
Yeah, I mean,
you didn't hear anything or even see him.
Didn't hear anything. And then I'm going to use Del Rio to transition to the Stars because we have 5 first-round picks on that defensive line. And if we're going to be good, they have to ball out. Del Rio said it as soon as he was hired. He's like, yeah, you can have all the talent in the world, but it doesn't matter unless you don't show up. And we have had players that have talent for years that don't show up. One fun fact about Del Rio. He definitely changed the way he used Collins, because Collins played back in the first few series, and all of a sudden he was like a 4th linebacker, and they couldn't run the ball, and it was awesome. Anyway, you have 5 first-rounders. You have Ioannidis, who might as well be a first-round talent because he's so good. Dude's just good God, love him. And you had a offensive line that was I don't think that line they had taken one snap together in the preseason. There's just no way. So if we're going to win, we had to win that way. But one of the reasons I love the Boston sack and the semi-exotic blitzes that Del Rio kept bringing is it forced the line to figure out, okay, well, where am I going to, react? Who am I going to pick up? And that allows one-on-one matchups. Kerrigan's first sack, he basically came untouched. The second one, he just blew up about 4 different dudes. But it also left Chase Young one-on-one with Peters. He dominated that matchup. Allen we had one cover sack which was probably in my opinion, now I'm thinking about it, might be the low-key play of the game where Allen sacked Wentz and basically took them out of field goal range because what's his name missed the field goal. Like, that defensive line was nuts. 8 sacks. We forced 2 fumbles. Both picks probably because of them, because Wentz knows he has to get rid of the ball. And to your point about bringing, Curl in for 3 safeties or whatever they did to try to slow down Ertz and Goddard because they were just torching us, is the counter. I mentioned this earlier. The counter was, I don't know if it's just because I haven't watched a lot of football because there was no preseason, yada, yada, yada. But I felt like their game plan just was like, let's just chuck the ball downfield. They went to Deshaun a few times. They went to Rieger a bunch. I was a little surprised, actually. I was like, you guys going to, like, try to throw, like, an out route or something here? And what happened is that defensive line was given 2, 3, 4 seconds sometimes to get to Wentz. And I don't know the stats off the top of my head. I bet you Wentz was hit at least 15 times today.
Easy. He got pounded today.
He got pounded. And to Eagles fans who, like, are bitching and moaning, like, dude, Tom Brady would have lost that game. Drew Brees would have lost that game. You can't – the defensive line was – if we're going to win, they have to be awesome, and they were awesome. They're the top star.
Human nature for Wentz to have had happy feet in that game, or to be a tick early on his throws in terms of, like, when the timing should have been, because he was under duress the whole game. Even in the first quarter, when the Eagles were doing whatever they wanted to, he was still getting hit and a lot, and he was taking it. And those hits, as anybody who's watched football ever knows, that, like, one of the big, like, fundamental corollaries of an odd defensive line will be, look, hit the quarterback, let him know you're there, breathe on him, let him know you're there. That's going to stay in the back of their mind. They're humans. If you're going to try to avoid pain, it's just that's how you are, especially if you're a quarterback. And if he knows you got constantly somebody breathing down your neck, and then after that they're pounding you, they're sacking you, they're doing all of these things, you're going to speed up. And yeah, exactly, like the pick to Moreau followed by the exact same throw basically, and the one that Moreland picked off, like, that's not coincidental.
People's
right?
Corner.
People's Corner.
Love Moreland.
The defensive line, just kind of finishing that point off, they were everywhere. I think the best part of all of this was, like, it's not just that Kerrigan, I think, finished with 3 sacks, broke Dexter Manley's record, all-time franchise leader in sacks, #1 game ball of the game, all so forth and so on. Props to Kerrigan, looked as good as he did at any point last year, or if not, in subsequent years prior. It's that every time he was there, somebody was there with him. Every time Chase Young was there, got a hand on him, somebody was there with him. Montez Sweat was he didn't finish, but Montez Sweat was there a lot. Deron Payne didn't finish. Deron Payne was in on a lot of plays today. Allen was probably, ironically, out of everybody, Allen was probably the least, and I'm not saying that as a detraction. It's just of the spectrum of all of those guys, he kind of finished towards the end of it. But Chase Young, he was everywhere. He's so close.
So good.
He's so close. That's like, it's just one more year of polish, like one more year of a real training camp and stuff like that. And heaven help all of you, because that dude is a monster, right? First game with no real training camp and no real preseason. He's already this close. And granted, I know, again, they're playing dudes off the,
Peters is old, but he's a vet. I think he's been an All-Pro once or twice. It's not like he was going up against, Gian Christian.
We'll get to Gian Christian. Peters. Chase Young, he was so much fun to watch. And again, Sweat played really well. Ioannidis had a couple of vicious hits. Like, that dude is just a monster. He's so good. Defensive line, just incredible. It was so much fun to watch. This was what we waited for this many years, and it finally came to fruition, and it was just fantastic.
All right, you ready for this? So we had 8 sacks today, right?
Uh-huh.
Bostic had 7 sacks from that line themselves. So you had Matt Ioannidis had 1.5 sacks. Chase Young had 1.5 sacks plus 2 strips. They gave Jonathan Allen a half sack. Kerrigan had 2. Sweat had 1, and Payne had half a sack. That's just the line,
right?
And I just, like, it's amazing. And it's one of the reasons why I love the blitzes, because, like, you have to pick and choose your battles at that point, which gives you one-on-one matchups with these guys, and they're all so good. Like, more often than not, we're gonna win that battle, and that's the only. If you don't get home, then our secondary is not good enough to cover people long enough. So, like, those blitz, get that ball out and give people like Moreland a chance to jump. They were, if you go back and listen to, or if you've seen any of the quotes from the players, Moreau said, I mean, I actually kind of like Moreau. He's got like 4 picks in his last 5 games or something ridiculous. He should definitely start over Darby when Fuller's back. But they asked him about his pick, and he was like, well, the Eagles had ran the same play, so I knew it was coming. One, I also think that's coaching. That's also probably good on him for probably watching some film and keeping track of what's going on during the game. But with our defensive line, you have to get that ball out. And that ball floated on Wentz a little and allowed Moreau to make a break on it. And next thing you know, instead of being down 20, 24-0 at halftime, that pick sets us up. We go in 17-7, and I credit like entirely the defensive line on it. Credit to Moreau for making the play, but like those plays happen because Wentz has to get rid of the ball.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Going from the good side to the bad side, we'll talk about the 3 down. We don't want to talk too much, spend too much time being Debbie Downers on this. You already spent a lot of time talking about it, so I don't really want to go further on it. But and we'll delve a little more when we talk about Haskins momentarily. But there's just nobody else on the offense. And I think one of the reasons the pass catchers, I call them the pass catchers, the collective group around Terry McLaurin, and maybe Logan Thomas, if you want to put him on the good side, like there's just nobody there. Like Inman made a couple of nice plays towards the end of the game. Sims made a couple of nice plays in spots, but like there's no, if you want to use the superhero metaphor, like there's no Robin to the Batman, or there's no Batman to the Superman. Like there's nobody there who's the second outlet, where like if you take away McLaurin, and you said it, like Slay was covering McLaurin, and I think Moose said it during the game, like they were shading safety help over the top to McLaurin in case Slay did get beat, because Slay can get beat. So like it was basically, they're like, beat us with somebody else besides McLaurin, and we couldn't. And it wasn't an issue today because the defense did such a great job of setting up so much for the offense, but it will be an issue over the rest of the course of the season. And somebody needs to step up and be the second alpha male on this offense, and it can't just be Logan Thomas, right? Like it can't be Terry or Logan Thomas or right? It just can't. I know, as we talked about, Turner's trying to draw up opportunities to get other guys open, but at some point it's just got to be mano a mano. I'm better than you. And we don't have that guy yet. We talked about it in the preseason and the preseason preview podcast, and it's coming to fruition right now. Like there's just not that dude, and it is a thing. And I'm, just not to be the harbinger of bad news, but it is.
It makes me miss Harmon. I don't know if Harmon would have been like the dude, but he's better than him. He's also a willing blocker. Yeah, the pass catchers are just, the receivers in general are just not very good. I mean, I think we talked about it. 3 of the 5 are undrafted, and McLaurin, while a stud, still a 3rd-round pick, and then you have Ganny Golan, who I think is a 5th-round pick or a 4th-round pick.
4, if I'm not mistaken, but still, like we touched on in the previous pod, which everyone who's missed should listen to. Level of competition, overcoming COVID in the offseason, like all of these things, like that's a steep learning curve. So, the bigger, more glaring, ugly today, especially in the first half of the game, wasn't much better in the second half, but the first half, the lefts, I mean, you mentioned the offensive line, but I'm going to hyper focus on the left side of the offensive line. Jaron Christian and Wes Martin, to quote the great Steve Spurrier, not very good, or not too good. Jaron Christian,
not too good.
He got beat really badly on, I think it was by Brandon Graham, I want to say, or Josh Sweat, one of those two guys. It was a pretty bad miss. Wes Martin was getting his ass kicked by Malik Jackson early in the game.
First or second play of the game, he got – I think you actually texted me.
Yeah. I think it was the first. If it was not the first, it was the second, like you said.
I mean, he got just tossed. Terrible.
And there were a couple of moments where it looked like, did you ever play offensive line before? And I was quietly, when I was talking about Kyle Smith, like I was quietly very, very optimistic about Wes Martin. I felt like he was one of those dudes where like diamond in the rough type of acquisition. And not that did not show today. He was bad. There was no point of the game where I was like, oh, Wes Martin's doing a nice job. And there were points like Sheriff got pushed around a little bit, different moments. I think Moses and Roulier, ironically, were probably the 2 better offensive linemen, which,
I thought Moses played well. And the fact that we never heard Rouillet's name is a good thing, in my opinion.
Exactly. There was not a ton of pressure, like screaming up the gut where you're like, okay, like the pocket folded or collapsed on itself or folded onto itself on Haskins, which again, to your point, like that's a Roulier thing among others. And I think I only saw Sheriff make like one boo-boo during the game, which is fine. Like it is what it is. Like that's just normal. But yeah, I think Moses had a really good game. But that's basically, like we said, the center onward to the right side. Not the best day for Jaron Christian and Wes Martin. The Eagles have a pretty potent defensive line, so you can say like it's going to get better in subsequent weeks. But you just hope that it's also going to get better because those guys get their shit together and get coached up by whoever the current offensive line coach is. And I'm sad to say it's escaping me right now.
Yeah, I don't know his name either.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Christian's going to be there very long. Now that Sadiq Charles is practicing fully, I kind of fully expect him to take that spot pretty soon. I have fairly high hopes for Charles. Everyone said he could have been a first-round pick if he stayed for another year. So I think talent alone will get him on the field, mostly because, A, it's well-known Rivera will play rookies. We have rookies all over the field. And B, Christian, I mean, that sack that I think you're right, it was Graham. He just went right around him, strip sack. The only good part about the play, and it's not good play, the redeeming part of the play is
that he
Christian
recovered
the fumble.
Yeah. Almost. I mean, almost didn't, but he did.
But that was an important aspect in the game because that was our first drive, I think, of the second half, and it was third down. And we had just forced a 3-and-out after scoring a touchdown in the half. That was a chance for us to really capture momentum. Now, granted,
it was a critical play.
We eventually did, but we pumped that back, and because of that sack, all of a sudden, thank God we have Trustway, the MVP.
God, Trustway's a punting machine.
He's so good. It's sad that we know so much about our punter, but that's a different story. But that fumble was recovered, I think, on the 8-yard line. So we went from potentially getting back into the game to all of a sudden giving the Eagles really good field position, and luckily our defense stood on its head, but not good. And then I saw Martin being pushed back more, noticeably than anyone watching football for fun as a casual fan should see, right? If you're watching the game, you're concentrating probably more on what the quarterback's doing or where the running backs are lined up, and then all of a sudden Wes Martin would just be there with them because he was getting pushed around so much. I was like, dude, get off the field. Sheriff did give up. No, Sheriff did give up that sack, and I actually texted my friends that he needs to be perfect. But you're right. The left side of the line sucks, and I think it's going to hinder what we can do with Haskins until we fix it.
It's a little bit of a help me Jesus, help me Tom Cruise situation right now with the left side of the line because it's I don't know what else to say. Yeah,
they're not very.
But the real goats, and I'm not talking acronym goat, I'm talking about the farm animal goat of this game. I think while you could lump in a good portion of the secondary, I think our safeties in particular, your boy Troy Apke, as you alluded to at the beginning of the podcast,
he's terrible.
Good fucking Lord. If we're playing, as we said, if we're playing Survivor on the 53-man squad, he's got to be the first one to go. He's just got to be.
How bad does that mean Davis was? How do you not make the team over Apke?
Seriously, this guy, ugh. I think Sean Davis was all athlete and he couldn't put it together on the field. And I don't know really much past that, but Apke is just fast read Dowdy, as we've said 1,000 times, man. There's just nothing.
So
I think
at least Dowdy was smart.
At least Dowdy was contributing on teams, right? Apke is terrible. I think he was the one who got beat on the Goddard touchdown. I think that was the case.
It was. I have 5 examples.
Okay. And then I mentioned so there was the second deep shot to Rager where he was running on Darby. Darby passed him off in a cover 2 situation. And Apke's supposed to be fast. Now I acknowledge Rager is really, really, really fast. He is really fast. But he smoked Apke, just smoked him, right? It was pathetic to watch. And it was just, if it wasn't for a bad pass, that was another touchdown. A typical Eagles quarterback bombing it over the back of our secondary, watching our safety huff and puff behind the fast receiver. It was just another version of that, except, Wentz didn't hit the pass to Rager. But, yeah, that guy's fucking terrible. And Landon Collins was ugly in the first quarter. I think exactly to what you said. Eventually we got him away from doing things deeper in the line of scrimmage, but he had that personal foul. I think it was a screen pass to Clement or something like that. That was dumb.
Yeah, that was dumb.
He had a false start or something. He had another penalty early in the game. He had missed some tackles. He did blow some stuff up later in the second half to what you were saying earlier, but not a good start for him. And I mean, you shouldn't necessarily take a player's salary into account when you're judging him, but for someone who's supposed to be a former all-pro safety who was signed to some $85 million contract, like, bro, there's no ROI there. Like, there's just not. Once again, our safeties are for the umpteenth year in a row, a tire fire, and nothing's changed.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk much here because for the four of you that listen to this podcast, y'all know I hate Apke. I hated him the day we drafted him. I was like, why are we drafting a terrible safety from Penn State in the 4th round?
That guy would have been there in the 7th, if not the UDFA.
He would have been undrafted. Cowboys just picked off Goff. But okay, so I don't think Collins played as poorly as you think he did. I do think the personal foul was terrible. That was just a dumb play. That was like a D'Angelo Hall-esque bonehead play.
LaRon Landry, I'm doing some performance-enhancing shit, and I'm showing you that. Yeah.
Yeah, what are you doing? But I actually think he played okay. Now, granted, to your point, if he's making $85 million, I don't want to say I think he played okay. Like, you're the highest paid safety in the league. Is he still the highest paid safety in the league? Regardless, one of the top 5 paid safeties in the league. And in a team that desperately needs talent in the back end, like, he has to play better. But I don't think he played poorly. I think one of the big reasons we were able to get after Wentz was because they just couldn't run the football. And that starts with our line, which freed up Collins, and he made a couple plays in the backfield. And then Curl also made a couple plays in the backfield. But, look, I told you I was going to harp on this, and here I am because I think Apke is just so bad it boils my blood. The Goddard touchdown, granted, kind of a hell of a catch from Goddard because he turned his whole body around. Apke's fault. The Darby play where he gave up the long, 55-yard completion to Rieger. Yes, he was on Darby, but no cornerback's going to be able to stay with him one-on-one. Apke wasn't even in the picture. The pass that Wentz missed to Rieger, to your point, I mean, Apke looked like I was trying to cover Rieger. And that's an interesting part of the game, too, because Moreau had just dropped a pick. And the next play, they almost hit a big touchdown. You had the personal foul helmet to helmet from Apke.
That was the one I couldn't remember. Yes. I remember this one that was dumb.
I'm not 100% sure he could have done anything else there because the player was going down. It was kind of bang, bang. I don't care. I said before, if he messes up, I'm going to harp on it. Terrible. And then there's one more. I said I had 5. I'll leave you with 4. We can move on. But he legitimately cannot be on our team next week. I don't know how to call Riverboat Ron, but get him on the phone. Listen to our podcast, Rivera. Cut him.
Cut that guy.
He's like Bakari Rainbow bad. Like, he's bad.
I really liked Bakari Rambo.
Yeah, we all did. But he was terrible too. So, yeah, I mean, just thank God that our defensive line was able to kind of stop some of that bleeding, but Apke's got to go, and he's terrible. And I think moving forward, hopefully he doesn't show up in game tape, and hopefully Dwayne Haskins just balls out from here on out.
Do you remember that 2013 draft that yielded David Amerson, Philip Thomas from Fresno State, and Bakari Rambo, and we got so excited that was our secondary? Sweet mother of Jesus.
I don't think Thomas was the other guy, right?
Yeah, Philip Thomas of Fresno State. Yep.
Did he ever actually end up playing, or was his foot just cashed the whole time? I forget.
I think he played, but nothing that you wanted to remember.
Man, disaster.
What an awful, awful draft. I think the best pull out of that draft, if I'm not mistaken, was Niles Paul.
Oh, love Niles.
Yeah.
I'll never forget where he shifted his face mask so he could blow somebody up. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about Haskins. Because,
my boy.
Obviously in this win, Haskins is a central character for obvious reasons, i.e. he's the quarterback of the team. It's interesting because, if I'm being frank, if the WFT lost this game, I think there would be a lot of commotion among the usual cantankerous DC sports fans and the usual over-boisterous DC sports fans, right? If you want to strictly judge from his on-field performance, this was not his best game. We'll talk about. I'll mention the rhythm in a second, but in general, there were more than a few errant passes, and I counted a few just going back through my notes during the game. I think their first legitimate momentum drive that they had, I think it was early in the second quarter, where there wasn't just like three and out, three and out, three and out. He missed Logan Thomas, so he had a bad force to Logan Thomas. First pass of the second half, he missed that bootleg pass. Like, again, Scott Turner put him in position. It was a nice pass. He missed it. He threw it behind McLaurin. That caused us to go 3 and out. There was another drive later on where we were driving, and then he forced that low pass to Logan Thomas on 3rd and 3, where like that was the one where Johnston was talking about, like, yeah, the MO on Haskins is he throws in tight windows. That was a 3rd and 3 pass. That was low. It was not the best decision to begin with, and it was not the best pass in general, right? So in one thing that you could see, like in the first half when there was just no rhythm, there were almost moments where he just looked like he was just throwing shit just to throw it. Right? He's like, I'm just going to try to force this. And like, that's not how you want to operate. You could see in moments his mechanics were breaking down a little bit. Like he was just kind of winging it in the literal sense of the word. And it was a little frustrating to see. Like, if you just took the first and second quarter as a snapshot of the entire afternoon, you're like, oh geez, this is not good. Now, to caveat it the other way around, there were also definitely flashes, even in the first half, where like my favorite part of that was probably right after Moreau's pick, and they went into the up-tempo 2-minute offense, and he just started connecting because he was, what was the old saying?
4 for 4 and a touchdown on that drive.
He was no brain, all cock and balls, right? And he just fucking started playing and drilling, and he was just, hitting one after another, and like, that's the dude, right? And like, that's what we wanted to see. And I absolutely 100% believe that a lot of his struggles were a function of the supporting cast and not having a guy who makes life easier for him. Like, you cannot take that away from where he was and how he plays, how he played today, rather. But so it's a chicken and egg argument in terms of like, is this his supporting cast or was it Haskins? And like I said, you can have debate either side of it. But one, it was the fact that like he struggled, and even to your point about the 14 of 19 where he finished, like there were hiccups, but he also hit a lot of smart plays. And then I'll stop talking in a second, but there was a bunch of stuff that came out after the game in terms of like what he did on the field, in addition to dapping up his defense, which you talked about, like just the way he had his leadership moments, which, as we've said before, like may not have been the case definitely wasn't the case at this point last year, but may not have happened at any point last year.
Yeah, I am a pretty staunch defender of Haskins. I think it's so hard to – I think part of the reason why I think he could be so good is to your point, like he just doesn't have a lot of weapons. And I think that plays into some of his numbers. But then to your other point, it's like sometimes when he misses, oh boy, does he miss. He can really airmail the ball. There was a play I couldn't give you the context. It was a play action. They were trying to get Thomas over the middle, and it was probably a 20-yard throw, and he just airmailed it. Thank God we were close to the red zone, and he basically threw it out the back of the end zone. If there had been a safety there, he would have thrown it right to the safety because he just overshot Thomas so much. That happens more than it should, for sure. I always think about against the Lions last year when he had McLaurin coming across and he was wide open for a touchdown and he just airmailed it. Like those throws are common for him right now. And that's something that he really needs to clean up. But look, you're right. The dapping up of the defensive line was awesome. Apparently he gave this rousing speech at halftime when Rivera was getting his IV.
Yep.
The players seem to like him. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently. When we played the Jets last year, and we were getting smoked. I mean, that was probably the worst game of the year. We got blown out by the Jets. Like, that's all you need to know. But he came over to the offensive line and was like, "What do I need to do to help you?" You could tell he wanted to win. And looking back on that, like Bergstrom was on the team, and you can tell he kind of rolls his eyes. But like Moses was like, "Oh shit! Like maybe this quarterback actually does care." And I think that's kind of built over the last year and a half since Haskins has really taken ownership of this. And I said in the beginning, but it was the most Alex Smith game. I mean, we only saw Alex Smith for 11 games. But 10 games. We were 6-3 in those games, right?
Yep.
And
Allen's favorite 6-3 quote.
yes. And what's so amazing to this, I don't know if I'd said this in the beginning of the podcast or if I said this before we started talking. In the last 3 wins with Alex Smith as quarterback, he threw for 178 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Dwayne Haskins today literally threw for 178 yards, a touchdown, and no picks, right? We won today because Haskins did not turn the ball over. We got it 3 times, and he made plays when we needed to make plays, right? And I think coaching goes a lot into this. Like the 4th down, I was begging the team to go on 4th down and 4th.
If there was one blemish on the day, Ron Rivera punting on 4th and 1, and I think field goal on 4th and 3. That was my biggest thing. And I'm like, you're supposed to be Riverboat Ron, the analytic. And then they went for it on 4th and 4, which I thought was even stranger. But I was like, you're Riverboat awesome. Ron. If you have any sense of like analytics, you know that like in any situation, 4th and 1, all the numbers overwhelmingly dictate that this is the most advantageous situation for you. It's a very, 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 very makeable situation, regardless of the fact that it's 4th down. And that was if I was going to say my biggest gripe of the day, that was probably my biggest one. But all's well that ends well, but sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, that 4th and 4, I was like, oh my God, going for it.
Yes.
And then we got it, which was awesome. But for Haskins, like, I think we've harped on it, still needs more weapons. That miss to McLaurin in the second half when on the boot was bad. So there's things he has to clean up. But this is also a guy that hasn't really gotten to play a ton because there was no OTAs. I mean, he's just out there throwing balls to freaking like Antonio Brown. So I think he'll clean it up a little bit. He'll get better. But if he can manage the game like he did today and not turn it over, I don't really care because ultimately, from what I see, the team likes him. And that is probably the most important thing. I think they want to play for him. They want to win. I think the best thing Rivera did was not anoint him the starter and make him earn it. And not only did he earn it, Rivera came out and said, 10 years ago, I said, let's ride with Cam, and I'm ready to ride with Dwayne. And I just think he oozes confidence now. I think the team feeds off it. So hopefully he gets better. He does. I mean, if we want to be good, he's got to be a whole lot better. But he's had 8 starts now, and we're 3-5 in those starts. More importantly, 1-0 this year. I joke that I think he's going to become an All-Pro. He's really far away from becoming an All-Pro. But I will take 178 yards, a touchdown, and no picks, and a W 16 times. Actually, let's revise that, 19 times on our way to the Super Bowl.
2 Wentz picks turned into 14 WFT points today.
Totally.
Right?
And the game ended when he fumbled.
Yeah. So it is what it is. I mean, you can say 178 yards ain't sexy from the fantasy football perspective, but it is from the WNL perspective. Using your 1-0 as the final segue point to week 2. I think on Thursday when I was kind of looking at the lines, I think San Francisco was a 7-point favorite against Arizona. And I am in the camp of Arizona being a frisky, sleepery team this year. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the pessimist in general, but like I did my ranking of the quarterbacks. I at one point had Kyler Murray ranked really high. And I tried, as someone who tries to avoid hype very early on. Point being, next week we go to Arizona to play the Arizona Cardinals. Murray is really, really good. And I don't want to say good in the sense he's just so dynamic. Like he is, not to make the same comparison.
He had 91 rushing yards today.
Yeah, he's very, very Russell Wilson-y in so many different ways. Like he's obviously not as polished yet as Wilson, but like he's just so goddamn dynamic. And they got that DeAndre Hopkins guy who had 151 yards. So it's not like the Texans could have used him on Thursday night or anything like that.
16 targets.
14.
That's how often.
14 of Kyler's 26 completions went to D-Hop. All right,
yeah,
he went to Nuke. All right. So, yeah, they like feeding him the ball, having to help with the corner that's got to guard him. Because I've always joked, like, DeAndre Hopkins is basically Spider-Man, that you just throw it anywhere in his direction, he's going to come down with it. I think Cliff Kingsbury is one of those coaches who just doesn't give a fuck. And he's like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to make you stop me. And if you stop me, great. But otherwise, I'm just going to throw it down your throat or throw it all over you and just, make you stop me. But the opposite end kind of, building on the Haskins conversation is that defense can be had. there were a bunch, like I had it up red zone on for throughout the course of the day. There were a bunch of throws that Handsome Jimmy missed today that if he made those throws, San Francisco would have won, right? Like I love Garoppolo. I don't think he's the guy. I just don't. Like I think where he's so far along in his career that you have to stop waiting for him to be like, well, when he develops, like the dude is what he is at this point. And I think he's kind of just good enough to be like look good in good situations and bad enough to be really bad
He's
in bad
Kirk Cousins.
situations. I don't even know if he's Cousins. Cousins has played better. The Cousins had a stink bomb today. Although I think Aaron Rodgers just went ham on the Vikings today.
My fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, he went ape shit on them. He went like, "Oh, you're going to draft a quarterback? Let me show you something on them today." But going back to the defense, like I was watching bits and pieces of it, and like Vance Joseph, he was like a DB's coach in Miami, then got pushed all the way up to head coach in Denver. He was so in over his head with that job, and like I always joke, like Vance Joseph, every time you see him on the sideline, he looks like that guy who has put his entire retirement fund is $100 worth of lottery tickets, and then he scratched them on to realize he didn't win, and he just has this exasperated look on his face, like, oh shit, I didn't win. Like that's all the time you see him, or like that's just him. And point being, like going back to Haskins, like it's not just going to be the defensive line that's going to help save the day against Arizona if we're to pick up another W against them. Like the offense has got to do their part, because again, it's there for the taking. Like Arizona got beat on a bunch of big plays today, and San Francisco's offense, A, has more talent, and B, is more dynamic than ours is in its present iteration.
Yeah, we actually, I'm going to bet on this game. I can already tell you that because we are opening up as 7-point dogs on the road.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes.
I'm going all in on the Cards right now. 7-point dogs on the road. I do agree with you. Murray is like pretty damn good. I think he had 91, or I don't think, I'm looking at the stats. He had 91 rushing yards. Now, he did have a pick, but the pick, I also watched the pick. It wasn't his fault. It got bad in the air. But here's the deal. I'm trying to keep my burgundy shades off, but it's tough right now because I'm so excited that
especially considering what we did today on the defensive standpoint.
I know. The Cardinals' offensive line is not good.
It's not good. It's been a problem for years. I don't think they've ever had a good offensive line.
And that's a problem for when you play the Washington football team, aka the Redskins. The only difference that I see between the Eagles' offense and this is a major difference. I'm not trying to underplay it, but the biggest difference, that's a better way to put it, is Wentz is virtually a statue. He's the little Roethlisberger-esque. He's a big dude, hard to bring down, can make plays, but like if you can get a hand on him, let's put it that way. Murray is a whole different ballgame. He's slippery. He's got that Russell Wilson vibe to your point. Like there's a couple sacks today where we were able to get a hand on Wentz, and then he just kind of like bounced around into somebody else's arms. Murray's getting out of that. So it's going to be like imperative that we tackle like very sure tackling next week, because I think we're going to be able to get to him similar to the way we were today, but he's just a lot more slippy. So we have to get home, right? Because if he does get the ball in the air, your boy D-Hop is probably going one-on-one versus, I'm guessing, Moreau or Darby. I don't know what Fuller's deal. The fact that he has barely practiced and didn't dress today is not good.
Not good.
Opinion. So it's probably those two again. And like Hopkins is one of the best receivers in the NFL, regardless of who's guarding him. And then you take mediocre corners, and he's going to have another 14 catch, 150-yard day. So we have to get home. I didn't watch. I mean, I had them on Red Zone, so we probably saw the same plays. What's that dude's name from San Francisco? Mozart? What's his name?
Oh, right. Ryan Mostert.
Yeah, dude, he absolutely cooked Isaiah Simmons.
I saw that. This is on the arrow route.
This is kind of why I'm semi-excited about this game. There was a big contingent of Redskins fans. And I even said, if we're going to trade back for anyone, trade back for Isaiah Simmons.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, granted, you don't trade back when you have a blue-chip talent like Chase Young. But if they were, just because they're going in a rebuild, a lot of people wanted Isaiah Simmons. Some people were, like, adamant about it. So it's exciting to see basically how our fan base is going to react to Young versus Simmons, because you know it's going to be a Twitter feud. And there's going to be a lot of screenshots of people being like, I told you so. There's going to be screenshots that said, I can't believe you thought this. They're already happening today. So I'm excited for it. I do think the Skins might win again. But that's my thought on the game. I think we're going to get home, and I'm excited to see Skins fans lose their mind over Chase Young versus Isaiah.
If anyone, especially after today's outcome, if anyone, and don't make a career out of one game from the perspective of Isaiah Simmons, or make a career out of one play for like that, the Arata Mostert that he ran down the field with, right? But if anyone, any DC sports fan will sit even either during the course of that game or between now and the course of that game and said, we should have drafted Simmons. You're a fucking idiot. Like, how could you possibly think that? Even if you said we traded back, I mean, shit, look at the RG3 trade. You still can't say like, yeah, we would have been better we would have been better off drafting Isaiah Simmons. Like, I'm sorry. That's not making a career like again out of one game for just Chase Young or Simmons, but like, come on, like, look at the talent profile. And I will say one thing for anyone who's going to disparage Simmons on the other end of the thing. Again, going back to Vance Joseph, I don't think he has any idea how to use Simmons. The one thing when I wrote this, like in my pre-draft, like manifesto of like, scouting all the top 50, I was like, Simmons is a fascinating athlete. One of those when we were talking about it in the preseason thing about Kaliki Hudson, right? Where it's like, is kind of this mold where you have almost positionless defense, and like Simmons fits that you could legitimately play him at 5 different positions on the defense, basically any spot outside the defensive line, and he could play there. But kind of like other players of that ilk, you need to have a very specific and logical plan to nurture that type of talent. And I don't trust Vance Joseph whatsoever to develop that type of growth plan for Isaiah Simmons. And I think this was exactly to your point, like the coverage of Mostert out of the backfield is a perfect opportunity of how not to put him in position to grow.
Man, he got, I mean, granted, Mostert is like, wow, that dude is fast.
Mostert is really good, but like you couldn't.
Well, I don't care how good he is. When he got that ball, I was shocked at how fast he was. It reminded me of Minuski a little bit. Putting linebackers out in space with running backs is just never a good idea.
Yeah.
But I don't. I want to say we're going to win. I'm like, I'm running so high on this damn Redskins win today.
I am punching myself in the groin repeatedly right now because I'm so optimistic right now too, and this is when bad things happen.
So I'm going to say we're going to win, just because you know what? It's 2020. Who gives a shit? We're a fan podcast. Put the burgundy shades on. I got my Redskins hat on to cover up my outrageous hair. I think Murray's going to get his. I think Hopkins is definitely going to get his. I think you'll see a little more crisper offense because, to your point, when we scored that first touchdown, when Haskins went 4 for 4, he threw an absolute strike. Oh, no, it's a different drive. Anyway, we went 4 for 4, but we went up tempo and like things just clicked.
Yep.
And in the second half, we went up tempo a lot, and we actually scored on 5 consecutive possessions. So I think like the offense will be more crisp. I think the defense will be there. 7-point dogs is ridiculous.
That's insane. I would love to see how that line swings over the course of the week.
Yeah. Well, the Eagles opened at 6.5. Game time was 5.5. I did take us at 6.5.
Did it really get all the way down? I'm surprised it got down to 5.5. If you told me it went up to 7, I would have believed you.
I was so bullish on this damn Eagles game. I don't really know why. Probably because I knew that their left tackle was out.
Yep.
But when I woke up, because granted, when I woke up at 7. It's 10 o'clock your time, so these rumors are already coming out. And saw Lane Johnson wasn't playing. Oh man, I was all in. I was like, time to eat. But I think Chase Young is gonna have another big game tomorrow or next Sunday. And I'm gonna pick the Skins.
You know what, man? Pass some of that Kool-Aid over. I'm gonna do the same thing. Shit, why not, man? 2020 has been such a mind fuck as it is. We need something to look forward to. So I'm gonna glug the Kool-Aid as well. Kyler Murray just reminds me of chasing the chicken in Rocky 3. For anyone who's a fan of that film franchise, it's like, but man, this defensive line, the way they played. Kenyon Drake is one of those running backs who's like, he looks good, but he's like you can find Kenyon Drake's
or not traded by so many teams.
Exactly. And
he's not that good.
at the end of the day, I'm going to put I'll put some faith, even given the struggles. Maybe they can get that cleaned up over the course of a few days with the offense. But the defense is there to be had. It won't give the same level of problems anywhere, the same level of problems, frankly, that Philadelphia's defense did. And I think we can do just enough to win this game and steal another one and start the damn season at 2-0. And my 5-11, or I can't remember. I said 5-11, 6. I think it's in 6-10. My 6-10 record will look already a little stupid by that point. But you know what? I don't care.
Yeah, we both took 6-10 because we both took the over on 5.5 wins.
Yes.
I'm in the Kool-Aid. I'll pour you a cup. This is a little off script, but I'm gonna go with it. Shout out to Ryan Kerrigan, 2011 draft class, which, by the way, if you go back and look at it, is outrageously stacked.
Outrageous.
When it comes to
Cam, Von Miller.
Yeah, J.J. Watt's in there.
So is the immortal
Robert Quinn's in there,
and the immortal Blaine Gabbert. Wait, so yeah,
dude, he had great hair though.
Inside joke for my friends who made it this far.
But Kerrigan, nobody talks about him. He's got 92 sacks now in his career. He's all-time leader for the Redskins. He also picked up the fumble to basically seal the win today. Like, he's still so good. And he's been good for a long time, and now he's the all-time leader in sacks for the Skins, for the Washington football team. So I just want to give him a shout-out because we never talk about him. We always talk about Sweat or Young or Nides, but Kerrigan's always there.
Yep.
Yeah, Kerrigan's always there.
I really hope nostalgia can be a double-edged sword in many cases. I can't remember what Kerrigan's contract situation is off the top of my head. I believe he's only got 1 year left.
It's his last year.
Right. I really hope, in terms of the regime change and like installing stuff like that, where he doesn't get pushed out. I don't want to see him go the Tom Brady route. I'm going to double down. Tom Brady to Tampa Bay was the most overrated offseason acquisition of any offseason acquisition.
You look kind of dumpy today.
Right. Double down on that. If Tampa Bay didn't have such a soft schedule, I would have picked them to miss the playoffs. I'm still not 100% confident. I picked them at 9-7. That's a separate topic for a separate day. I don't want to see Ryan Kerrigan finish in another uniform, just from a nostalgia, from an emotional standpoint.
He's a skin.
Exactly. And I think of all the transition and all the hype that fizzled, I mean, I alluded to Griffin, and among all those different players and stuff like that, like, it's nice to have one guy. I mean, Trent Williams was Mr. Redskin for a long time, and even he's gone and burned the bridge on his way out. It's nice to have one. Like, that's our guy. In the bad times, like, that's still our dude, and I don't want to see him wear another uniform. If it does, because that's what the NFL world is, he's obviously going to retire as a member of the team. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about him. Did not have a good season last year, for just being completely honest, but he played well. He played well against the Eagles last year. Exactly.
Was dropping him in a
coverage. Had no idea how to use him.
I love Kerrigan. He's on his last year of his contract. I see the quotes that come out from Chase Young though, and he says, "Yeah, Kerrigan's one of the dudes."
That dude.
That dude. I think Rivera will reward him. He. For those who listen to my Nats podcast, know I love Zimmerman. I call it Zim's Corner. He's got a Zimmerman vibe to me, in the sense he's quiet, does his job, is good. Gets like outrageous hate sometimes when he doesn't have a sack because he's not, Von Miller or whatever. But I get the vibe that he's going to want to come back, finish with the Redskins, and he's kind of Chris Cool in this way, in the sense that he'll make a deal, stay, because I don't think he wants to play anywhere else.
Yeah,
and I hope so, because
he's not like, I need to cash in big time on my last contract so I can go somewhere else, because that's the most important thing for me. Like, not to take anyone away who wants to make more money, because that's the point of capitalism. But like, I think exactly to what she said, it's equally as, if not more so, important for him to stay in town and finish his career where he first started.
Yeah. Plus, you get another year of playing. I mean, that defensive line is going to be together next year too, because I think we've already picked up Allen's 5th year. And then I'm sure we'll pick up Payne's option too. That line's together for another year.
They'll have to make some tough decisions elsewhere on the roster, but I agree. I don't think they're going to break that up. And if they do, that's going to have to take some real creativity. But that's another conversation for another day. We will leave it here on that note. Thank you for everyone who's made it so far into the podcast, or this far into the podcast, as we implore every single time. Subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us, if that's a term, on YouTube, and whatever, like us, whatever it is, if we try to actually post this onto that channel. But until then, we hope to continue this on a weekly basis, win or lose. But thank you for listening. We hope to talk to you later.